Imagine this. You walk into a room full of strangers. Nobody knows your name. Nobody knows what you do for a living. Nobody knows how smart you are, how experienced you are, or how hard you work to get there. And yet, before you even finish your first sentence, people have already started making decisions about you. Confident, nervous, sharp, forgettable, trustworthy, not quite sure. They may never say those words out loud. They may not even realize they are doing it. But their brain is quietly placing you somewhere in the social hierarchy. And here is the uncomfortable part. They are not judging your ideas yet. They are judging the way those ideas arrive. The speed of your voice, the shape of your sentences, the way you hold eye contact, whether you rush to fill silence, whether your words sound like statements or requests for permission. You may believe people are listening to what you say, but underneath that conversation, something else is happening. Their nervous system is asking a much faster question. Does this person sound like someone I should take seriously? That question is answered in seconds, sometimes in less time than it takes you to introduce yourself. This is why two people can say the exact same thing and create completely different reactions. One person says, "I think this is probably the best option," and the room keeps moving. Another person says, "This is the best option." Same basic message, completely different impact. One sounds like they are offering an idea. The other sounds like they have already examined the alternatives and made a decision. That difference may seem tiny, but tiny signals shape massive impressions. You have a visual image, your clothes, your posture, your facial expression, the way you enter a room. But the moment you open your mouth, you reveal something even harder to hide. Your vocal image. Your voice tells people whether you believe your own words. It tells them whether you are comfortable taking up space. It tells them whether you expect to be challenged. And sometimes, it tells them that you are already preparing to back down. Most people never think about this. They spend hours choosing what to wear for an interview, a presentation, or a first date. They fix their hair. They check the mirror. They straighten their jacket. Then they walk into the room and destroy the entire impression with the first 10 seconds of speaking. They talk too fast. They overexplain. They laugh nervously after making a serious point. They soften every opinion with phrases like, "I could be wrong, but maybe this is stupid. I'm not an expert or anything." Does that make sense? Now, sometimes those phrases are useful. Sometimes they show humility. But when they become automatic, they send a deeper message. I don't fully trust what I'm saying. And when you do not sound convinced by your own words, other people feel no reason to be convinced either. This is not about pretending to be dominant. It is not about speaking in a fake deep voice or acting like the most important person in the room. In fact, people can usually feel when confidence is being performed. Real confidence is quieter. It does not beg for attention. It does not rush. It does not use 20 sentences to prove what 5 words could make clear. It does not panic when the room becomes silent. High-status communication is not loud communication. It is controlled communication. And the first place that control becomes visible is at the end of your sentences. Listen to these 2 versions. I've worked in this field for 10 years. I've worked in this field for 10 years. The first sentence rises at the end. The second sentence settles. That rising pattern is often called uptalk. You have heard it everywhere. In meetings, on podcasts, during presentations. People use it when they are unsure, but they also use it when they are completely certain. That is what makes it dangerous. For many people, it is not a sign of insecurity. It is simply a habit. They may have picked it up from friends, family, coworkers, or the place where they grew up. In some cultures and communities, rising at the end of a sentence signals friendliness. Keeps the conversation open. It shows the listener that you are not trying to dominate them. But in many American professional settings, that same pattern can be misread. A statement begins to sound like a question. Certainty begins to sound like hesitation. And without realizing it, you may be asking the room to approve every sentence you say. Imagine walking into a meeting to pitch an idea you spent 3 months developing. You know the data. You understand the problem. You are the most prepared person in the room. Then you say, "So I think we should launch in September?" Suddenly, the idea sounds unfinished. Not because the strategy is weak, because your voice placed a question mark where your confidence should have been. The people listening may not consciously think, "That sentence ended on a higher pitch." They simply feel less certainty. That is how most communication signals work. They operate below the level of conscious thought. The listener experiences the impression without understanding where it came from. And once that impression forms, your words are filtered through it. If you sound uncertain, even strong ideas can feel weak. If you sound grounded, people often give your ideas more room before challenging them. That may not be fair, but human judgment has never been perfectly fair. We are pattern recognition machines. We use tone, posture, timing, and facial expression to make fast predictions about other people. The problem is that your speaking habits may be feeding those predictions without your permission. So try this. Say your name out loud. Then say where you work or what you do. Listen to the last word. Does your voice rise? Does it fade away? Do you rush through it? Now say it again. This time, let the sentence land. Do not push your voice down in an exaggerated way. Do not try to sound like a movie trailer. Just finish the thought. Let the final word feel complete. You may notice something strange. Changing the way you end the sentence does not only change how you sound. It changes how you feel. Your body follows your voice. When you stop treating your own statements like questions, your nervous system begins to experience the moment differently. You feel less like you are asking to be accepted. You feel more like you are contributing. That is the first shift. But it is only the beginning. Because even if your voice sounds confident, there is another habit that can quietly destroy your credibility. And almost everyone does it when they feel nervous. They keep talking. They answer a simple question with a 5-minute explanation. They add context nobody asked for. They repeat the same point 3 different ways. They feel the listener losing interest. So they panic and add even more words. The strange part is that they believe more explanation will make them sound smarter. Usually, it does the opposite. Because the more words you use to carry a simple message, the harder the other person has to work to find the point. And when people have to work too hard to understand you, they rarely blame themselves. They blame the speaker. They think you are scattered, unprepared, maybe even hiding something. High-status communicators understand a rule most people never learn. The more important your point is, the less clutter it can survive. And in the next part, we are going to look at why saying less often makes people listen more, how nervous people accidentally talk themselves out of credibility, and the simple pause that can change the way an entire room responds to you. Think about the last conversation you had with someone who immediately impressed you. Not because they were the loudest person in the room. Not because they dominated every discussion. And probably not because they had the most interesting story. If you replay that conversation in your mind, you'll notice something else. They never seemed rushed. There was space between their thoughts. They answered questions without sounding like they were searching for your approval. And when they finished speaking, they stopped. That last part sounds almost too simple to matter. But it changes everything. Because most people are terrified of silence. The moment a conversation becomes quiet, something strange happens inside the brain. Your heart beats a little faster. Your thoughts speed up. And almost automatically, you begin searching for something else to say. Not because it's necessary, because silence feels dangerous. Psychologists sometimes describe silence as a form of social uncertainty. Your brain hates uncertainty. It wants to know whether the other person agrees with you, whether they liked what you said, whether they think you're intelligent, or whether you've just embarrassed yourself. Instead of waiting for that answer, most people try to escape the discomfort. They fill the silence. They keep explaining. They soften their point. They add unnecessary details. They start talking just to avoid hearing nothing. Ironically, that is usually the exact moment they lose the room. Imagine you're in a job interview. The interviewer asks a simple question. Why do you want this position? You answer confidently. Then the room becomes quiet. 1 second, 2 seconds. Suddenly you think, they didn't like my answer. So you keep talking. I mean, I've always been interested in this industry. And honestly, I've been looking for something different, and I know I don't have experience in every area, but I'm a fast learner. Before you realize it, you've turned one strong answer into 5 minutes of apologizing. Nothing forced you to do that. The silence did. Harass fascinating. The interviewer may not have been judging you at all. They may have simply been thinking. Maybe they were writing notes. Maybe they were deciding what question to ask next. But your brain interpreted silence as rejection, and then tried to rescue itself. This happens everywhere. Business meetings, dates, classrooms, family dinners, even casual conversations. The uncomfortable truth is this. People often reveal their insecurity, not by what they say, but by their inability to stop saying it. Now compare that with someone who answers the same question and simply waits. No panic, no extra explanation, no nervous laughter, no attempt to control the other person's reaction. They trust that what they already said is enough. That kind of silence feels incredibly different. Why? Because silence communicates something words cannot. Comfort, emotional control, patience. People often mistake confidence for speaking well. Real confidence is often the willingness to let your words exist without immediately defending them. The same principle applies to another habit almost everyone has. Overexplaining. Have you ever noticed yourself saying things like, "Just to clarify, what I actually meant was, sorry, let me explain that better." Again, sometimes clarification is useful, but many people clarify before anyone is confused. Why? Because they're being perceived. Imagine ordering coffee. You ask for a latte, then immediately add, "Only if it's not too much trouble. I know you're probably busy. I'm sorry." The barista simply nods. They weren't upset. They weren't annoyed. But your brain assumed they might be. So you apologized for a problem that never existed. This is what psychologists call anticipatory behavior. You respond to imagined reactions instead of real ones. Your brain starts having conversations that haven't happened yet, predicts criticism before criticism exists, and then changes your behavior to avoid it. The strange part is, people can feel this, not consciously, but emotionally. When someone constantly explains themselves, the listener begins wondering, what are they trying so hard to prove? Confidence is surprisingly economical. It doesn't waste words. It doesn't explain every decision. It doesn't ask permission for every opinion. Think about the people you naturally respect. Teachers, leaders, doctors, mentors. The best ones rarely speak the most. Instead, their words carry weight because they don't throw words away. Every sentence has a purpose. Every pause has a purpose. Even their silence feels intentional. This doesn't mean you should become cold, or robotic, or emotionally distant. Quite the opposite. Warmth matters. Humor matters. Kindness matters. But warmth and insecurity are not the same thing. One invites people in. The other asks for constant reassurance. There's another behavior that quietly weakens your presence. Talking too fast. When we're nervous, our breathing changes. Our muscles tighten. Our thoughts speed up. And our voice follows. We rush through sentences, almost like we're trying to outrun our own anxiety. But here's the problem. The faster you speak, the harder people have to work. Your listener isn't just hearing your words. They're decoding them, processing them, connecting them, comparing them with everything else they know. If you speak faster than they can comfortably process, their brain starts giving up. Not because you're boring, because you're overwhelming. Imagine drinking water from a fire hose. The problem isn't the water, it's the speed. This is why some of the world's best communicators deliberately slow down. Not because they're slow thinkers, because they understand something most people don't. The listener needs time to think with you, not chase you. Steve Jobs understood this. So did Barack Obama, Morgan Freeman, Oprah Winfrey. Notice how they rarely sound rushed. Even when speaking to millions of people, every important sentence has room to breathe. And when something truly matters, they often slow down even more. Why? Because slowing down tells the listener, this part deserves your attention. Your pace teaches people how to value your words. If every sentence is delivered at maximum speed, nothing feels important. Everything blends together. Your voice becomes background noise. But once you learn to control your rhythm, people begin leaning in. Not because you're louder, because you're giving them space to listen. And in the next part, we're going to talk about the communication habit that separates ordinary speakers from unforgettable ones. It has nothing to do with vocabulary, nothing to do with intelligence, and almost everything to do with one simple psychological principle. People don't remember information. They remember how you made them feel. There's one final communication habit that separates people who are simply heard from people who are remembered. And surprisingly, it has very little to do with intelligence. Think about the people you've never forgotten. A teacher, a mentor, a manager, maybe a friend who always seemed to know exactly what to say. Years later, you probably can't remember every sentence they spoke, but you remember how they made you feel. Calm, capable, safe, inspired. That isn't an accident. The human brain is built to remember emotional experiences far more easily than information. Facts fade. Feelings stay. This is why you can forget someone's exact words, but never forget how they spoke to you. Most people believe communication is about transferring information. It's not. Information is only half the conversation. The other half is emotional regulation. Every conversation changes the emotional state of the people inside it. Some people leave you feeling anxious. Some leave you feeling judged. Some make you feel invisible. Others make you feel surprisingly relaxed. Not because they have better advice, because they know how to regulate themselves first. This is where emotional intelligence quietly becomes vocal intelligence. Have you ever noticed how certain people never seem rushed, even when everyone around them is panicking? Imagine a pilot speaking during turbulence. Imagine a surgeon during a complicated operation. Imagine a firefighter arriving at a dangerous scene. If those people started speaking quickly, raising their voice, showing obvious panic, everyone else would panic too. Instead, they usually become calmer. Their voice slows down. Their breathing becomes more controlled. Their words become simpler. Why? Because calmness is contagious. But so is anxiety. Your nervous system is constantly influencing everyone else's, and theirs is influencing yours. This happens far below conscious awareness. Neuroscientists sometimes describe this as emotional contagion. Human beings naturally synchronize with one another. We mirror facial expressions. We mirror posture. We even mirror vocal rhythm. Spend enough time with someone who speaks slowly, and you'll often slow down too. Spend enough time with someone who constantly interrupts, and you'll find yourself speaking faster just to keep up. Communication isn't just about exchanging ideas. It's about exchanging emotional states. This explains something many people misunderstand. Confidence isn't something you perform. It's something other people experience while talking to you. When your words are clear, your breathing is steady, your pace is intentional, and you're comfortable with silence, people begin relaxing around you. And once people relax, they listen differently. They stop looking for mistakes. They stop waiting for their turn to speak. They become curious. That's influence, not manipulation. Influence. There's another mistake people make when trying to become better communicators. They become obsessed with techniques. Should I make more eye contact? Where should my hands go? How often should I smile? Should I lower my voice? Should I pause here? Those questions aren't wrong, but they're incomplete, because people don't connect with techniques. They connect with authenticity. If you're constantly monitoring yourself, you aren't really present. You're performing. Ironically, the people who appear most natural usually aren't thinking about themselves at all. They're thinking about the person in front of them. They're curious. They're listening. They're responding instead of rehearsing. One of the easiest ways to become a better speaker is to become a better listener. Not the kind of listening where you quietly wait for your turn. Real listening. Listening to understand. Listening without planning your next sentence. Listening without trying to impress anyone. Because something remarkable happens when people feel genuinely heard. They begin trusting you, and trust changes everything. It changes business, leadership, friendships, relationships, parenting, even conflict. People don't always remember who won an argument, but they remember who made them feel respected. The most influential communicators understand one simple truth. People rarely resist feeling understood. Which brings us back to the beginning. Remember that room full of strangers? The one where everyone judged you before you finished your first sentence? Harif learned. Yes, first impressions matter. Yes, your voice matters. Your pace matters. Your pauses matter. Your confidence matters. But none of those things exist to help you dominate other people. They exist to remove the unnecessary noise between you and your message. Because confidence isn't speaking louder. It's needing to prove yourself less. It's trusting that one clear sentence is stronger than 5 nervous explanations. It's allowing silence to exist without rushing to fill it. The slowing down when everyone else speeds up. The speaking because you have something worth saying, not because you're afraid of what people will think if you stop talking. And perhaps that's the biggest shift of all. The goal isn't to sound confident. The goal is to become so present that confidence happens naturally. Because the people who leave the strongest impression aren't usually the ones trying the hardest to impress. They're the ones who make everyone else feel comfortable enough to simply listen. So the next time you walk into a room, don't ask yourself, How can I make people like me? Ask a different question. How can I make this conversation feel easier for the other person? That single shift changes everything. Because the strongest voice in the room is rarely the loudest. It's the one people trust. And trust is something your voice begins building long before anyone remembers your name.